States Army, followed by careers in hospital clinical laboratories and teaching clinical lab science at Del Mar College. He has been a member of U2C3 since 1996. During that time, I think you're on your third round as president. He's been a choir member and a longtime church grounds worker, and I don't know what we'd do if we didn't have you, people like you to take care of our massive property. He's an amateur cellist and enjoys most outdoor activities. Kirk has one daughter, 3 stepsons, and multiple grandchildren. Originally raised within the Methodist Church, Kirk is a Buddhist. Please welcome Kirk Newport.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to start my message this morning by doing something that is a first, as far as I know, and maybe a last at the U2C3. I'm going to show you a short clip from an opera. A few of you know that I'm a big opera fan. This is about a 2.5-minute clip from very near the end of the 1908 opera Elektra by the German composer Richard Strauss. It's an adaptation of the original Elektra, a play by Sophocles from the Greek Golden Age around 400 BCE. Elektra is the name of the main character of the story. She is the daughter of the late King Agamemnon, and by this part of the opera, she is in an exceedingly good mood, and she wants to dance. At the beginning of the opera, she's described as a wildcat, hissing and spitting at everyone, but she's in a really good mood now. There's not too much singing. What little there is goes like this. It's in German, there's subtitles, you'll see it. Be silent and dance. Everyone must join me here. I carry the burden of joy, and I dance before you. For those as happy as we, only one thing is fitting. Be silent and dance. So stay with me, 2.5 minutes, you can do it. Your mission is to watch Elektra dance and try to imagine why she's so happy. Her sister, Chrysothemis, pops up for just a bit, but it's Elektra's big finale, so this is very near the end of the opera. Afterwards, there's going to be a very short multiple choice quiz. See if you get it right. So here you go. Let's see. 7:20. she didn't faint. She's you know what. But before that part, what would have made her so happy? And here's the quiz, and it's multiple choice. A, she won the lottery. Maybe. B, like Eliza Doolittle in the famous musical My Fair Lady, she's just returned from a triumphal debut at the Royal Ball and could have danced all night. Now, C, she and her brother Orest have just murdered Queen Clytemnestra, who happens to be their mother, and her mother's no-good boyfriend, Aegis. C sounds about right. Okay, you're right. The answer is C. Before you judge Electra too harshly, she's upset that her mother and Aegis had previously murdered Electra's father, King Agamemnon. And before that, Agamemnon had sacrificed Electra's sister, Iphigenia, to the gods before heading off to the Trojan War. So there's some really complicated family dynamics going on here. But yes, vengeance is what it was all about, and vengeance is the topic of my sermon today. I tried for years to get some of our previous settled ministers to do a sermon on the topic, but they never took the bait. And I thought maybe they thought a sermon on one of the 7 deadly sins was too Catholic or too reminiscent of the fundamentalist diatribes that many of us have fled from in the past. We religious liberals like to be upbeat and optimistic about human nature, but I believe we ignore some of these human frailties at our own peril. Some of you Catholics might remember the 7 deadly sins. How many of you could rattle them off? I don't want you to do it, but some of you could. Was it muscle memory? I have to ask you. Okay, here they go, in alphabetical order. Envy, gluttony, greed, lust, pride, wrath, or vengeance, and what was the last one? Sloth. Sloth. Oh no, sloth. Who knew they would ever be mentioned in a UUA church? My main goal this morning is to remind us about the perils of vengeance and its ongoing, if not increasing, presence in our culture. And I'm going to present an unorthodox and maybe heretical to some argument that vengeance is by far, far the most extreme and potentially uncontrollable of the human frailties. Again, I was trying to get ministers to do this for a long time, and nothing happened. It was no big deal, and I sort of forgot about it. And then my interest was rekindled last year when there was a case of a Missouri man on death row made the national news. There was a guy named Brian Dorsey. I don't know if any of you remember the case. He was convicted of killing his cousin and her husband in what was later described as a drug-induced psychosis and alcohol-induced blackout. What made his case unusual was that over 70, that's 70, prison correctional officers and some family members of the victims signed a petition to the governor urging him to commute Dorsey's sentence to life in prison. The reasons for their petition included his deep shame, acceptance of responsibility for his crime. He had a spotless disciplinary record and worked as a barber for the correctional staff. Needless to say, a position of immense trust if you're going to let a convicted murderer take a scalpel to your neck, a razor to your neck. The petition included phrases like extraordinary rehabilitation, and our intention is not to cause more harm, but to do the opposite. Nevertheless, he was executed. The governor stated that his execution brought justice and closure. I was also influenced by the 1995 film, Dead Man Walking. How many of you have seen that? I'm just curious. Some of you, a fair number. I also read the book of the same name in preparation of this talk. I highly recommend both the movie and the book, although they are quite different in some ways. The book came first. It was written by a Catholic nun, Sister Helen Prejean. In it, she chronicled her experiences as the spiritual advisor to 2 young men on death row in 2 completely different cases after they had been convicted of some particularly pointless, gratuitous, horrific murders. Like the case in Missouri, she attempts to have their sentences commuted to life in prison without parole. in both cases, I would describe the men not as monstrous demons, but as basically immature sad sacks. A sad sack, by the way, I had to look this up because I wasn't sure, is defined as someone who is inept, unsuccessful, and prone to mistakes. And that's exactly what these two guys were like. For Sister Helen Prejean, though, they were still God's children. She was motivated by her Catholic faith, specifically their position that all human lives are sacred and worthy of a chance for repentance and reconciliation. In both cases, the evidence was not exactly clear. There was changing and contradictory testimony by others involved. It wasn't clear which one of them had done it. So what to do? The efficient, practical, politically expedient solution was to make sure that somebody got executed. And that's exactly what happened. Perhaps the most surreal memory I took from the book were scenes outside the prison gates on the nights of the executions. On one side of the road, you had opponents of capital punishment. They were often members of religious groups or political organizations. On the other side of the road, there was kind of a party of sorts. People there with their balloons and champagne and glasses, and they would pop the corks and toast each other at the assigned hour of the execution. This was a regular event for many of the capital punishments that took place, and this was in Louisiana, by the way. The movie, again, was quite different. It took some dramatic liberties with the original story. It consolidated the two crimes into one story with one person on death row. By the way, for those of you who remember, Susan Sarandon played Sister Prejean, and Sean Penn played the convicted murderer. And I'm not a big Sean Penn fan. He was excellent in this film. If you were to see one Sean Penn movie, this would be it, in my opinion. Although he admitted being present at the crime scene, he denied murdering anyone. To make matters worse, he's not a very sympathetic character. He's cocky, he's arrogant, to the point where he makes sexual advances to Sister Prejean on their first meeting. It doesn't go very well. And for those of us watching the movie and seeing this guy for the first time, we're thinking, yeah, the electric chair sounds about right. Sister Prejean was also interacting with, within the movie, the father of one of the young men who had been killed. And he's kind of in the same boat. The electric chair sounds fitting for this guy. The real dramatic license by the screenwriters comes at the very end, and I'll come back to that at the end of my talk. I found both these cases interesting because they seem to straddle the line between justice and vengeance. It's not quite clear what is going on here. But most of the time, we know vengeance when we see it. It's payback, retaliation, retribution, getting even, getting satisfaction, settling the score, eye for an eye, and what goes round comes round. It's emotional, personal, vindictive, and often an unending private affair, and it can feel really good. Justice is its kind of less exciting, kind of boring relative. Justice is usually less emotional, it's public, it's more concerned about restoring order and closure. So we do it, we forget about it, and then we move on. The world goes on. But vengeance is way more emotional and exciting. One can hardly watch a Western or a cop show without being exposed to the concept of vengeance. Someone who has done something bad, and we're going to enjoy watching them get it. Unfortunately, this whole theme seems to be in the news more and more lately. I just read a very sad account about some of the recent events in Syria, where many citizens are eager to hunt down and set things right with members of the recently overthrown government. Individuals have been dragged out of their houses in front of their families and beaten to death by angry mobs. Here in the United States, there have been calls from some leaders expressing the need for more executions. We need more executions. And even more distressing, the entire concept of revenge has entered our political discourse. Before I go further, please note I am not suggesting that bad behavior go without consequences. Anyone who has raised children know all about this. The need to respond to, correct, or punish the misdeeds of our neighbors is probably a necessary evolutionary behavior required for social animals to coexist with each other. But vengeance is definitely not about coexistence. I must hope that no one here has ever been in a situation where they would have been tempted to celebrate the harm or death of another human being. I suspect what usually happens is that someone wrongs us, we spend a lot of time and emotional energy fantasizing about some sort of mild retribution. The irony is that usually nothing ever happens, and in the meantime, we spend a lot of time exhausting and tormenting ourselves with what's probably never going to happen. Vengeance is a really difficult emotion to let go of. How difficult is it to let go of? Okay, here's my heretical theory. In addition to the opera, news events, and 2 versions of Dead Men Walking, I thought I would be remiss if I didn't look for some background in the Bible. And perhaps, the most famous saying about revenge comes from the book of Matthew in the New Testament. And here Jesus is quoted, and you've all heard this. "You have heard it said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also." So that's a very standard Christian doctrine, to turn the other cheek. This is a very idealistic philosophy, but not practical in many, many cases. There are many Bible verses extolling the virtues of forgiveness and the perils of revenge. And then I decided to go down the rabbit hole. And I watched some real sermons by real ministers about vengeance. And these were not UUA ministers. The first one was a very congenial, down-to-earth guy who basically said that vengeance is bad. You'll be tempted to do more bad things if you do it, so don't go down that path. The answer, let God handle it. God is all wise, and he will do the right thing. So it's above your pay grade. Just accept that and let God handle it. The second minister was all the things the first guy wasn't. He was hellfire and brimstone. And I can't not say this. We usually say 15, 20 minutes for a sermon. Their sermons were 50 minutes. There were 3 of them on vengeance. So 150 minutes, 2.5 hours of hellfire and brimstone. I got about halfway through it, but it got pretty repetitive. He started off the same as the first guy, let God handle it, but then it got darker. And then it got darker still. He started talking about God's judgment on sinners. And we all know people are fallible. No one's going to debate that. Not to worry, God can handle it. But then he kind of went off the deep end, in my opinion. He proclaimed that there is one sin that even God can't forgive. And I'm quoting from the book of Thessalonians, which is what he quoted in one of his sermons. "In flaming fire, taking vengeance on them that know not God and that obey not the gospel of our Lord, who shall be punished with everlasting destruction." He really liked the flaming fire part. He kept referring, it's very graphic. If you see some guy coming at you with flaming fire, it's going to probably get your attention. He goes on to gloat, in my opinion, reminding his parishioners that they had nothing to worry about. That was for all the bad people. And then he asked a really bizarre, a good question, but a bizarre answer. He says, why was God so tough on non-believers? He forgives all kinds of things. You know what his answer was? He said, because it is just. Ooh, take that. I completely reject this belief. 1, I'm not a theist, so I don't think God's coming for me or anyone else. 2, if I were a theist, I'd be a Universalist. Sound familiar? I would believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Does that sound familiar? For visitors today, that's our first principle. And the name Unitarian Universalist comes directly from that tradition. So that's nothing new. Third, I'm a Buddhist, and we believe many things, but one basic belief is that we are usually responsible for our own suffering. And it definitely doesn't come from the wrath of God. So watching all these sermons, the first one wasn't too bad, the others were pretty horrific. I was reminded why I come to a church like this and not like others. My heretical argument that vengeance is the most dangerous of the deadly sins is simply that I realize that there are people in this world who can conceive of a supernatural deity with infinite power and wisdom, and even he can't control his rage. This God isn't much better than Electra or the people outside the prison gates with their champagne. Sometimes even we flawed, mortal human beings can inspire to do better than that. At the end of the movie Dead Man Walking, again, that's the fictional account, there are two very dramatic effects that to me had a very profound meaning. The movie's almost 30 years old. I still remember this scene. Moments before, or minutes I should say, before his execution, the Sean Penn character for the first time admits his guilt. Sister Prejean breaks into tears. She says, there are places of sorrow that only God can touch. You've done a terrible thing. You've done a terrible thing, she reminds him. But you have dignity now. You're a son of God. He responds, and again, he's also crying by this point. He's attempting to laugh. He says, no one's ever called me a son of God before. They call me a son of you-know-what a lot of times, but never no son of God. And then he says, it figures I'd have to die to find love. Thank you for loving me. The closing scene of the movie, again, after the execution takes place, shows Sister Prejean praying in a church alongside the father of one of the murder victims. I hope we can all aspire to be so compassionate. Thank you for coming this morning and listening.